welcome everyone. We are very happy to have you at the Csun Support Provider Orientation Meeting. Today's March 18, 2015, and I'm Dr. Susan Belgrad. I'm joined with Ivan Chang, who will be up here shortly, Dr. Ivan Chang from Secondary Education, who is the Secondary Ed Support Provider, and Pam
Induction
Sear,
coordinator.
what did I say?
Support provider.
Induction. I can correct myself. Induction coordinator, and Pam Sear Sherman, who is also an induction coordinator for elementary education. And we have Jane and Robin and Aaron with us today. Don with us today. And we are very excited about bringing the induction program from Csun. And we also collaborate with Dominguez Hills for our support providers to learn about their important role in the continuing development of new teachers. So what we would like to begin with is the big picture. And so what we've provided for each of our colleagues that are here today is a shot of the graphic organizer that's provided by BITSA FACT on their website. In fact, this is part of the FACT User's Guide that everyone should be able to access very simply by going to Google and typing in FACT User's Guide. They'll get a PDF that they can download. FACT. Yeah.
Stands for?
Formative Assessment of California Teachers. And many of our candidates that have begun the program heard FACT and they went, oh, FACT. It is a continuation of FACT, and that is really what this illustration demonstrates for all of our support providers, is that many of our teacher candidates understand that the TPEs are based on the California California Professional Standards for Teachers, and are used to the TPEs. However, as they've moved into induction, depending on your school district, they move into a BITSA program that either looks at domains or it looks at the CSTPs, and they're all the same. It's just that they're organized a little differently, and that's why this is a particularly good graphic organizer, because it's color coordinated, and it's helpful for students, no matter what setting they might be in with their school district, of understanding how they are moving through beginning teachers support and assessment, also known as BITSA. And it also helps them to anticipate how they move through the various steps of induction. Are there any questions about that from people that are sitting around the table?
BITSA. Give me the quoting of BITSA again.
Beginning teachers support and assessment.
Lots of acronyms.
Yes, I refer to that as California acro speak. And it is helpful. It just
Susan, maybe some background on BITSA and induction and how they are connected.
Okay, I could actually have Robin talk a little bit about that. We have someone at the table who has who predated the California Commission work on beginning teacher support and assessment. Could you just talk about very quickly how BITSA has begun and why we as a profession discovered that we were losing too many teachers during the first 3 years of their career, even after they worked very hard to become teachers, we were losing them. So beginning teacher support began as an endeavor to what?
Beginning teacher support, initially it was a beginning teacher support program, and then it evolved into an assessment piece. We realized, particularly in California, that 50% of our beginning teachers were quitting. 50% of them were quitting in the first year. The retention data was astronomical, and 50% of that 50% left in the middle of the school year in December. They excluded retention such as pregnancies or moving out of state, and when they focused in on the actual reasons that they were able to gather, it was related to feeling unsupported. and not knowing if your skill set was enough, and feeling unsuccessful along with isolation, and growing as a practitioner, because teaching is in essence, you're handed the keys, the door is closed, and it's isolating. It's hobbling in a way.
You're also feeling very overwhelmed.
Yes.
That isolation, insulation, when you close that door, feeling very overwhelmed, not being able to also navigate the bureaucracy of the district.
Right. So the components of the support involved having an understanding of the context of the classroom, having someone support the context of how a school institution works, giving feedback and support for lessons or management, or looking at your practice, looking at your reflection. It evolved from the beginning into a much fatter thing, and along the way, these on the right, the CSTPs, evolved, I think in 1997, and they were what we called in BITSA the job description for teachers.
Yeah.
The job description, and if you're going to go do a job, you want to know what is being asked of you. And so BITSA formed itself around the professional responsibilities of beginning teachers. And then along came the left side of this document. The TPEs were born as offspring of the professional standards. And so support providers do exactly that. They support the beginning teachers.
And what's the connection to induction?
The induction is a 2-year period. You can jump in with me. The induction is a 2-year period where the state asks you, in order to be able to clear your credential, you meet a determined amount of requirements, and one of them is to participate in an induction-like program. And different, I believe, I might be wrong, but different school districts, universities, and employers use a variety of different induction programs
And
to
BITSA is
meet
one of
those.
them.
And BITSA is only one route that you can meet your induction requirement to clear your clear.
So
How was that?
that was fabulous. We're very lucky to have archivists and people who have understood this from the outset. And across the country, it was pretty much recognized simultaneously that across the country we were losing far too many really high qualified people in the profession, from kindergarten all the way through high school. And the focus then became on what do teachers need in order to be successful? And exactly what the opposite was happening. We were throwing them into the hardest classrooms, not giving them support. Maybe a teacher that retired gave them a lot of materials, but we were not intentional and focused on helping our teachers to become the vision in their mind, the ideal self of the teacher they had set out to become. And so we will be addressing that in the context of the professional development that we're offering to our support providers. So that is a wonderful way to move into the program that Csun has just begun. We proposed to the commission 3 years ago that we would like to offer a self-standing induction program so that at the university level we could support teachers in our local area, as well as teachers from our sister institutions, if they chose to receive the kind of support directly from support providers at their school, as well as from the faculty leading our courses. So I'm going to ask Ivan to describe the structure of the program that we've been approved to lead through the Commission on Teacher Credentialing.
So our program consists primarily of 4 master's level courses, and the bookend courses that we sort of commonly refer to as Course 1 and Course 4 are the induction courses. They contain all of the content of the induction program, the BITSA components, the beginning teacher support and assessment pieces that Susan was just describing and Robin was describing. And then we also provide 2 additional courses as electives. And those 2 electives are selected by each candidate based on their individual needs. So a candidate may feel that she has a greater need for some more technology and may then choose a technology course that's approved to satisfy that elective. Another candidate may feel like I need some work on ELA and supporting students in academic literacy, and so that might be a different elective. The 4 courses represent the academic side. The other big component is the field work, and this is where you guys come in as support providers. We'll talk a little bit more about the support providers, but every candidate has to satisfy a field work component. Obviously, those candidates who are already employed at a school can satisfy that easily by the work that they're doing. But for those who are unemployed, we require that they have 72 hours of field work supervised by a host teacher, and there are some specific things that they have to do during those classroom hours that satisfy assignments from course 1. And so I'm going to turn it back to Susan to talk a little bit more about course 1.
Okay, so course 1 is a combination. We are looking at the ITSA form of induction. We're looking at the FACT, F-A-C-T, Formative Assessment of California Teachers. And we have also inserted a number of thoughtful readings and assignments for our teachers to consider themselves within the lens of each of these CSTPs. Do they have a good grasp on their subject area knowledge? Also known as PCK, if we're referring to science, and increasingly we're talking about this with math and the upcoming NGSS standards of engineering, and of course English language learners we have a content of knowledge with that, and social studies, and even the arts. So we understand that teachers begin with their students. So there's also readings that we have in our first course on buds of knowledge. You might know the Law and Monty work that many of our credential students here at Csun study. Our students read these articles and reflect on how that fits into the context for teaching and learning, which you'll notice in the orange part of the induction is really what we're beginning to look at. We're also considering how not only the teacher's subject area knowledge, but how they are connecting to their schools and their understanding how the school is organized and how different practices and procedures that might be different from school to school are incorporated in their school. And that we're asking them to collect enough knowledge and information about their students. Do they have any special needs? Are they on what levels of English language learners have they been identified as? What are some specific ways that they can connect to their students? So learning assignments that we provide to the university in the first course enables them to focus a lens on the context for teaching and learning. We also ask them to become quite reflective, and as support providers, we're going to ask you to join that reflective element because we feel it's so incredibly important. For the teachers, especially in the Csun cohort, we ask them to begin with an autobiographical inquiry. Who was the teacher that I wish to become? What was the picture in my mind when I set out to become a teacher? What are the constraints that along the way that I overcame in order to become this teacher? And where am I going? How am I going to get to become that professional that was so embedded in my mind as I persisted to become a teacher? Because we found that many teachers never reached that ideal. And it was likely, again, because of those early induction years, where instead of pursuing the goal, they begin to comply or to sort of respond to the many constraints, and we likely understand what that's like. So we importantly, I'm going to hand around now, that they look back at the induction plan that they left their credential program writing, and it might have been a sort of a breezy draft of where they induction plan is one that they will craft together with their support provider at the school, and they will file that eventually with us. And as you can see, this process asks them to engage in, box number 2 says that they are going to develop a focus question for their inquiry. The inquiry has to do with their reading of all the standards, the CSTPs, and completing a self-assessment of those elements and criteria that where they see themselves. I like to refer to that as finding a baseline. Coming into the profession and seeing where you baseline. You might be really strong in your content knowledge. You might feel like you are very competent and strong in understanding the science. And even when you don't feel that you have a grasp of it, you know how to get to that, you feel totally confident. But you might feel a little uneasy about classroom management strategies. Many teachers self-identify that they want to learn how to lead more engaged learning classrooms, but they really haven't developed those tools for giving the students some meaty, engaging hook of a problem or a project and having them move silently, quickly into groups and then to become productive writers. They help them how to do that. So they identify that that is a focused question for inquiry. Throughout the fact document, it talks about action research. And it's interesting because at the university level, we think of action research as scholarly and academic work. But truly, in our profession, every day, we are social science researchers, right? If you're wondering, gee, if I just change my instructions a little, will that result in students having more clarity? Or if I intercept what's going on between 2 or 3 students by just moving next to them, will that result in them getting back on task? So all through the day, we are social science researchers. So I like the notion, and I hope you will celebrate this with the teachers, the candidates that you work with, that as they develop this CSTP, or this individual induction plan, they are essentially identifying what their topic of inquiry is as teachers. Ivan, would you like to add something to that?
Well, there's the field work component, which is where you folks come in, right? We can't do this. The academic side is what we do on campus through our courses, but the field work is really the part where the rubber meets the road. And the candidate first identifies a support provider, or in the case of those who don't have one that's qualified to serve in that capacity, you folks are sent from Csun to do that task. And then you will work with the candidate to complete some of those course assignments, including the one that Susan just passed out, where you help them think about where they're at and where they want to be as a teacher, and just sort of guiding them in thinking it through. And they have to fill it out with your support. Pam.
And I just wanted to interject, in terms of the IIP, there's a correlative between that and the electives. Ideally, that when they're working towards their electives, there's a particular area, as Ivan articulated, differentiation in instruction or classroom management or learning more about some specific content areas, that they will then select the electives for their academic piece to fit that area as it relates to their IIP. So there's an alignment that goes hand in hand between the two.
Yeah, they're going to want to consult with you about number 4 on this form. At the end of the inquiry, what changes would you expect in student achievement?
Yeah.
And see, the whole goal of this is it's all about the students, right? It's all about giving all of our students equal and fair opportunity to become achievers across the curriculum. And to shift from overly focusing on the deficits, let's say, of English language learners, of finding ways to create a classroom community in which there are ways in which they excel and they demonstrate that they have, obviously, would they have a strong funds of knowledge, and that they're competent in many ways that perhaps are not reflected as they struggle to become English learners. So your role with this in the field, working with your candidate, is really incredible because you help them to be realistic. I've had some teachers that say, oh, by the end of 6 months, I'm going to be having these fabulous classroom communities communities in which all students are 100% engaged. And realistically, to look at that, you can move toward that, and you can say, well, you know, my instruction is going to improve so that by December, I will see that the students quickly move into their groups and they show themselves to be engaged, and as a result of that, I see that they're achieving in mathematics or science or literacy.
So it's setting concrete goals. So you, as a support provider, will help the candidate, the new teacher, determine some very attainable, concrete goals that they can aim for and work towards. And like Susan was mentioning, sometimes it may be too lofty, right? I want all my students to yeah. And so your job is to bring them down to earth and help them achieve and be successful. So that's the key thing. Now, with respect to that, I would like to turn this back to you, Susan, to talk about or to have them brainstorm on these 4 categories.
Okay, so each of you have this beautiful, colorful graphic organizer in front of you. And we would like you to spend a few moments on your own writing underneath, you can write it in the circle or just in the white space next to it, how you see these, what are these processes, what are these behaviors that you would be engaging in as a practitioner, as a mentor, as a collaborator, as a professional.
Right? How do you see yourself
Yes.
doing these things? And what are some of the things you'll be doing?
Pam, would you like to lead this part of it? Helping us to fill this in?
Sure. I think you wear multiple hats, needless to say, in a variety of different settings. And so this is to help kind of quantify and try to see how the different hats, the different roles, and the different responsibilities you will have as you work with your in-depth team. One of the things that I was just saying to Ivan, maybe before we do that, I think maybe it would help if we talk about initially who your inductee is, who your candidate is, if you're working with them at what grade level or what assignment, because that will, I think, impact a little bit about how you interpret and how you see yourself in your role. So, Dan, could you share with us? Oh, sorry, it's John. Sorry about that.
We've got it now, Don. We've got the name.
Fine. Sorry about that. Who's your candidate? What is it? Single subject? What grade level? What subject
Mark.
level?
I haven't met him, but over email we talked. He's in Einstein Academy in South Korea, and he's teaching chemistry and earth science. And I'm impressed by him, but I haven't had a chance to really contribute anything yet. So I'm sort of waiting for this meeting to go out.
Yeah.
So you know what you need to be doing, right?
Right. I mean, I have had one experience of being a support provider for a student teacher in advance, I think, of 554, 555. So at least I had that one experience. That was a few years ago. I'm here.
Great, thank you. How do you want to share with us?
I have Michelle. She is at a private school, elementary, in a first grade classroom. The school has, I believe, only gifted and talented children. And she is a co-teacher in her first grade classroom, being more of the assistant co-teacher type of thing. It's not exactly, they don't have this, I don't want to use the word power, but they don't have the same level of equal responsibility. She gets the added responsibility of yard supervision, and it currently doesn't have as much instructional time as I'm understanding it. But she is a co-teacher in first grade there.
And I believe I have Christine Musgrove. I just got the email from her today because I have not met her. She is teaching at IB Academy, yes. And she's teaching pre-calculus, calculus, and algebra 2. So she is, I think she mentioned she would like to focus on the pre-calculus class, the last period. But that's all I know of her at the moment.
And have you done supervision before at the university?
Yes,
So you work with student teachers as well?
yes. So I've done that at the secondary level.
Okay. So that kind of tells us where we're at now in terms of our assignments, and then taking it to the next step then in terms of the different roles and the different capacities. What are some of the salient characteristics or responsibilities you see that you feel that you will be fulfilling or addressing as you work with each of the candidates?
For me, the first one that stood out, well, two that stand out, and it might just be my personality, but the first one that stood out is professionalism. Beginning teachers do not understand the level of professionalism and what that looks like. Usually they're younger, they're in their early 20s, and that is an entirely new environment, and what that looks like, how that smells, tastes, feels, and how important that is. So I wrote down that one of my responsibilities or my roles or what it might look like for me is modeling professional communication, having a professional demeanor, and demonstrating professional organization. And then the other one that, actually all of them mean a lot to me, but that's because I've done this before. In terms of collaboration with Michelle, she is collaborating every minute with her co-teacher. And so I feel it'll be my responsibility to model collaborative planning, that we have collaborative planning together. We've started to plan some lessons together. And I already brought her materials so that she can see what sharing of materials looks like, and how you receive it, and how you give it back in good shape, and how you add something to the file so that they want to loan it to you again, and what that looks like, how to take notes when somebody's giving ideas, and express appreciation, and how to give ideas without feeling like you're taking over. Do you want me to do the others?
Sure.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Here I
Go
go.
for
In
it.
terms of mentoring, I always give 3 before 1, so I'm always praising and complimenting at least 3 different things before I say, let's talk about. I kind of have more of a peer coaching mentoring approach where it is very reflective, where we look at it with these open-ended questions. I think it's easy for us to be talkers because we're in education, but I think it's more important that we're in a mentor role, that we're listening and asking. Listening and asking are paramount. I don't know if it's just elementary school teachers and new ones, but usually they cry.
Oh, they cry.
And really having compassion for the weight of the job that they want to do well, and supporting that. And also I think another part of a mentor is once they trust you to give them a little push every now and then. Pushing them, keeping them on track. And without that, you can't have that without trust. So that establishing of trust is where Michelle and I are big time right now. I've already watched her teach, so that was really a good launch for us. And then as a practitioner, when her children left the classroom, we were talking about different things, and I literally got up and modeled some strategies for classroom management right then and there in her classroom, walking around, and we were talking about moving the children, and I also modeled helping her with her lesson plan construction.
Very, very good.
It was a start.
Good job. You bring off one. And I think for Dawn and Jane it's a little bit different because you have a bit.
Secondary, but it's
It's
also
also
secondary.
It's also very different. So what resonates, what jumps out at you in terms of some of the, things that you see that yourself as far as your role? And I kind of pejoratively say our middle name is support. And so taking that kind of mindset of what do you see, how you'll be able to work with Christine?
For me, put down, share some practices that I've used that are successful, and suggest ideas to maybe try or improve or, if needed. And then maybe brainstorm, come up with suggestions that she would like to try. And then as far as mentor, I have similar things like encouraging positive reinforcement, positive comments before the suggestions of areas that could improve. And collaborator, just have an open communication so we could talk and, like she said, the trust, and make sure, we have that open, and so we can communicate and have an empathy as a professional.
Right. That was when Robin was talking, that was one of the words that came up that resonated with me is the empathy, the sensitivity, is the passion and the compassion, but also the empathy. Walking in the same shoes. How does it feel? Right. Good. Thank you. Don, do some sharing out with us.
As a practitioner, I would think that, I guess the thing that came up to my mind since I wrote this stuff is that I tend to want to ask first how they thought it went. Not because I expect to get the answer I want, but I want them to own it. And then if I have something that I think didn't work as well as they seem to be saying, I will say so. I had a case like that. I can't remember the last semester, but it was never very well resolved. And the same one again this semester, so it's a little tricky.
So that, in terms of your role, that puts you kind of in interesting, maybe some of the things that we'll be talking about today, you can take back and make application with the student teacher as well as the teacher candidate, your inductee.
Yeah. And as far as collaborator, I have a real hard time like pulling teeth out of the chin to try to get planning documents from my student teachers. And what I wrote down here is something about shared planning of trajectory and activities. In mentor, I wrote down thinking about thinking. I took a look at what you hear.
I'm sorry to steal too.
That's what it's about. It's a sharing, right?
Yeah, and in the professional, advising about responsibility, just as my mentor, my first year on contract with the LUSD, found me coming late to class, first period one morning, and stopped right there and said, "We can't do this." Leave home earlier. I come in, he said, I do my prep work in the morning, so there's no question about having time. So that sort of thing, I was kind of shocked. I felt sort of put upon because the traffic had been so bad. Here I was, I'm doing my best to get in here and boom. Professional responsibility.
Yes.
Sometimes we do a little extra, I think.
Right. I had a similar conversation just yesterday on the student teacher as well. So this kind of piggybacks going into, again, wearing different hats, seeing our roles and some of the different paradigms that are already in place as far as cognitive coaching and our roles of mentoring and modeling. So we're going to move into that, the next slides.
I'm going to, for a second, can you open up that back guide? Because I want to show them a couple of great resources. So that back guide is your guide to success in a number of ways, because it really rolls out the entire program. So the context for teaching and learning is exactly that. They need to collect data. They need to understand the context for teaching and learning. And now that Robin's already been working with her candidate, but as you're coming in, your candidates have completed this. And it's very significant because this is really what has gotten them to look more carefully at their classrooms, if they are in their classrooms, and obviously when you're working with the teachers that have been assigned to these classrooms. So it's really important for them to do that. And now they're moving out of that into the assessment of teaching and learning, and to do that, what they're expected to do is to go back to their IIP, identify those standards that they're observe. Obviously, Robin has done this with her candidate. And in somewhere in this document, you will see the continuum of teaching practice. And it's actually a handout that I think we can give out maybe today.
Yeah.
These paper handouts. Okay. And they will identify themselves on the continuum from emerging to exploring, applying, then integrating and innovating. Those are the continuum of teaching practice. Ivan, my colleague here, is a nationally board certified teacher. And, you know, in the years since the economic decline, we haven't been celebrating the fact that there is this continuum from beginning teacher to becoming nationally board certified if you so choose. Every teacher does not choose to do that, but those that do know that it is an asset to our profession when teachers do become distinguished. There's many perks in many states, but the bottom line is they are the innovators. They have improved their practice, and they have that optimistic professional feeling that teaching is an optimistic profession because there's always more. We're never finished as teachers. And so this continuum of practice helps your candidate to engage himself or herself in. And what's fun for you, I think, exactly as you said, is that you engage in this practice too. You end up sort of getting on this road to engagement and professional artistry yourself. So this is really an important part of this. Now you can go back to the slide. So I wanted to see the progress that your candidates are going to be working on. So the next part of this means that you're going to be visiting your classroom, and we're asking you to have 2 visits in which you conduct an observation of a lesson that your candidate has prepared in advance. And this first lesson is really just sort of getting familiar with the process. So they have been asked to prepare for that with a simple basic lesson that fits right into their curriculum. And following that, we ask that you conference together with them exactly what you already know how to do, to share your observation evidence. And it's interesting that we're using the word evidence here, because induction is a process where throughout in our program, throughout the 1 year, they need to show evidence along the way that they are meeting or exceeding their induction goals. So it's important for us to get into the habit of saying, okay, what evidence did you collect that students found that they had grasped or comprehended what the objective of your lesson was? What is the evidence that you collected that is summative or formative, that is giving feedback to the students of how they can approximate the benchmark? And then again, helping students, the candidates to look at the way their classroom is supporting, and you've all talked about this too. So we're very cognizant of that. You've also talked about recommending resources, whether they are text readings, articles, blogs. You know what's out there for them, and you might have just heard an NPR article that's on the radio. But whatever it is that you're making these connections for them, and you're recommending for them how they can continue to come back to that individual induction plan, the action steps that they've created for themselves, and perhaps augment those or segment those, or just say that I've really reached this and I'm going to continue moving along as on a professional continuum. So the individual induction plan is something you're going to continue seeing and coming back to. They're expected to file that with me as their instructor on April 1st. April 30th for the Monday night people, and April 1st for our Wednesday night people. So that week, I'm really asking them to really have this pretty firmly in their minds, which means that they've met with you. They've met with their support providers within the schools as well, so that they're really clear about this, and you've already given them some feedback and help them to make these action steps realistic. And then they will be engaging in a lesson design process where they really give some careful thinking and planning. This is their the apt process of planning, teaching, reflecting, and applying. Again, There's always more. But we want them and you to feel that you are part of an ever-growing cycle of improvement. And that comes from collecting more and more knowledge about your students and how they achieve. And you're going to be led into helping them to complete some other assessment forms that, not assessment forms, planning forms that are provided. Questions about that so far? So as you're entering now, they are moving into preparing a lesson study. Ivan has wonderful, deep experience with lesson design and causes the responsive teaching cycle. So I'd like to shift over to him in a couple of moments to talk about that. What we have asked the teachers to do is to figure out when would be a really good time to exercise your proposed action steps in leading the students in an engaging lesson, one in which you are not the sage on the stage. You get them excited and engaged in an activity, and the focus becomes on how the students are responding to your instruction. As a support provider, you've all been supervisors, you know that you see things that the lead teacher is not seeing while he or she is teaching. You know, they're so focused on getting through the lesson that they're maybe not observing when students begin to tune out, or when students begin to subgroup, or when students are coming up with some really good interaction or responses that they didn't even hear them whisper. So you as a support provider can help them to start mining the actual student interaction, that peer-mediated learning that goes on, or those unanticipated turns in the curriculum that perhaps would be worthwhile for them to pursue. So you're going to guide them to plan and teach with a focus on students' achievement. Okay. The other thing that you'll be asked to do, and I'm going to hand these over to you now, is reflect with them on their KWO chart. And you all know KWLs, right? I like to brag that I worked in the beginning part of my career with Donna Ogle. You all know who Donna Ogle is? She's the originator of the KWL. I worked at National College of Education, and a lot of amazing people between National College and Northwestern, that was just up the road from us. Amazing people in both in math, science, literacy arose from there. But anyhow, KWLO has been transposed, in this case, into KWO. So these are questions that your candidate that your candidate will ask herself or himself, and come to you at the planning stage of just the simple observation, but this will again be repeated when they do lesson study. So what do they know about their instructional practice? And what I'm finding is they're writing this very globally. Now, which reminds me to have you look at some of the LA Unified materials, because they're actually very, very good. They break all this down. Very, very good. And then what they want to know about their instructional practice as it has to do with student outcomes. Okay, so not so much that I really know how to lead a direct instruction for 10, 15 minutes, but instead I really want to know how I enter that inquiry process with my students. How do I allow them to really think through, or how do I create the kind of environment in which students begin to engage in peer discourse? They don't even need me. I figure out a way that they engage in this respectful discourse. Whatever it might be, it again ties back to that my IP, and they really do need your feedback on this. And then the interesting question, go ahead.
Can I, because Michelle and I have engaged over this document and I'm familiar with it, some of my questions that I have now are based on that experience. The student is filling this out with us or on their own?
They fill it out on their own, but they need to run it by you so that you can give them some more specifics.
So what happened here is a lovely conversation for us all to have. She started lofty,
Yeah.
and it wasn't tangible, and it sounded like she has an S on her chest, you know, superhero. And I thought, wow. And so I watched for the things that she asked, and you know, I was very good about collecting evidence for her, and then she went back and said, okay, I'm gonna change this because it really wasn't valid at all. So that was a learning experience for her. My question is this supposed to relate to the IIP? Am I supposed to have seen this IIP? When is this constructed? This isn't the one from her preliminary.
Right. She has a draft of her IIP that she probably shared with you already. Just a couple of the domains that she identified.
And are those supposed to be
Yeah.
these?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is why before they do lesson study now, you will need to connect that IIP.
These two need to
that.
relate and talk to each other. Yeah, okay.
And I'm thinking as we're going through this that really would like to share with each of you the LA Unified Lesson Study template because they have broken that down into a focus element, curriculum practice, teaching strategies, and action steps. And they give examples of teachers that have, at different grade levels, that have actually created this document. And as a result, it gives you as a support provider a great deal more opportunities to zoom in and target those areas. And as I was mentioning earlier, it also helps you say, whoa, that's long term. Let's break that into segments. And within the next 2 weeks, you can work on this and hope to see your students moving in this direction. And then by the time you're in the second semester of this program, and unfortunately, those that are starting in the spring are going to have different students in the fall, right? So it really gave us pause and think that this is a program that we really want to start in fall all the time so that our teachers have the same students throughout the year, so that they really grow with their students.
What document is that?
This is from LA Unified. Can you talk a little bit about the site?
So in Los
It's
Angeles
called
Unified School District, they're doing,
Teacher Growth Plan.
it's part of the new STAL evaluation process. And they're using Charlotte Danielson's teaching and learning framework as the basis of their evaluation. So every teacher that's being stalled has to do 2 rounds of lesson planning and observation. An administrator will first go over their lesson plans and then observe them implementing that lesson once in the fall semester, once in the spring semester. And they fill out this comprehensive sheet, very similar to the forms in fact, but a little more robust, I think.
Yes, and way more
Reflective.
reflective, yes.
So based on that, then they're given their evaluation, things that they did well, things that they should work on in those observations. So that's the evaluation side of LA.
The assessment side, yes. And actually, you can access these documents off of my website by just Googling my name, Susan Belgrad, and going to the 595J course. You see under documents, I have all these documents listed there for you.
And again, it's the
yours-
teacher growth, what was it?
You'll just see them under LA Unified. You can see LA USD planning, and you'll see LA USD cycle. I think
It's called Teaching and Learning Framework,
Yes.
TLF.
Yes.
Or you can just Google those words. And part of, to build on what Susan's saying, is your role as a support provider is to help guide the candidates in those reflective conversations, right? Just as you did, Robin, in helping her come down to earth a little, it's also to help her to reflect, to help your candidate reflect on what they're doing well, how the students are doing, what needs to be done to help students succeed, right? What's the next step?
Can I share something very
Please
interesting
do.
about this process? I don't know if it's helpful or bragging, and I did not do it intentionally. I was actually a little overwhelmed with all the documents that she said, okay, you need this one and this one and this one and this one. I'm like, we hadn't had this meeting. So while I was collecting evidence, in the end, we went over all of the evidence, and then I just gave it to her. And I said, sweet thing, you're gonna fill out all these forms later. The only thing I want you to do is think about these things that we talked about. you know, positive and ideas for reflection, and categorize them here.
Yeah.
And so she broke down, it was 4 pages of evidence, because I wasn't sure what I was collecting for her, because this was unreal. And she took all of her evidence, and she was able to realize where that evidence belonged. And it was super
That's
helpful.
very high level, yeah, for somebody, especially in her role as a co, but really an assistant teacher, so that really speaks to her capabilities.
And then it took her about a week or so, you know, bless her heart, and she sent it back. And I think that was an excellent process for her to realize, wait a minute, that was something Robin saw, but where does it really belong in this? And how am I going to collect it and put it in all these other documents? And it was absolutely by error on my part, but it worked. So I thought I would share that.
I would suspect that it also came from
Experience.
expertise. So you'll see, actually, this is where these forms do lead. And so it does, at this point, ask for the collection of evidence and to sort it. And this is not up on the projector, but it asks them to sort it into the CSTPs that they are especially.
Yeah, I should have gone in there with that staple in my head.
It's okay. I just.
You're backwards, Matt.
Great minds think alike, and we've been at this long enough that we understand that we want to show evidence, and we want to be able to be articulate about who we are as educators, and that education is a profession. So that is exactly where the teachers need to move with their collection of evidence, and how the lesson itself, and how the way that you observe their lesson fits into this. And again, I think this is so open-ended. I really do like the way that the LA Unified Materials bring you as a support provider along in a much more specific and
A little bit more guided.
guided thing.
Can I ask some clarifying questions, please?
Yes.
During the initial classroom observation or the second classroom observation, are we putting in evidence for everything we see, or is it what I would like to focus on for that lesson related to this?
I would say both. I think you're looking at.
Michelle was under the understanding that it was just this one, and there I had given her the 4 pages.
Yeah, there are 2 components to growth. One is identifying the ideal, where you want to go. And then the other is identifying where you're at, what's the reality. And then once you see the goal and the reality, then you can develop an action plan to get to your goal. Right? So you do need
Okay.
both. You do need to brainstorm with your candidate, or at least prompt them in thinking this through deeply. Where do you want to be? What are the things you aspire to do well? And then what are you doing now, and what are some things that you want to work on to be that ideal self?
I have a good example for you. One of the math teachers in our Dominguez Hills cohort wrote on KWO, I'm really good at this and I'm really good at that, and I'm really a good enforcer. My students know when they walk into my classroom, there's no time to fool around and they have to do this. And then his goal was, I want my students to feel safe. I want them to feel like they have a voice in my classroom, and I want them to have engaging lessons. And that was exactly what you would say, okay, this is your goal, but to get here, there's some things that you need to think about in terms of the environment and the setting, the sense of belonging that your students have in learning.
So you're helping the candidate
Yeah.
reflect and self-assess, to really force them to think about where they're at and where they want to be.
Thank you.
And I think that speaks to, that first bullet too, the road map. So you really are helping them map out the big picture and then the steps to get there.
So one of the things that I want to encourage all of you to think about is this notion of helping and collaborating with the candidate, because from an article from Boyatzis in 2002, he talks about the need that we have to work with one another. And there's a long quote here, I'm not going to go into it, but you can look at the PowerPoint later. But the main point here is that we all are better when we work together, right? And then it's not a glib statement. So I want to show you a quick little video to drive home that point. And then hopefully it'll allow you to understand why I say what I say. What happened to my little video? I didn't.
For the past 5 years, I've been investigating this question of where good ideas come from. It's the kind of problem I think all of us are intrinsically interested in. We want to be more creative, we want to come up with better ideas, we want our organizations to be more innovative. I've looked at this problem from an environmental perspective. What are the spaces that have historically led to unusual rates of creativity and innovation? And what I've found in all of these systems, there are these recurring patterns that you see again and again that are crucial to creating environments that are unusually innovative. One pattern I call the slow hunch, that breakthrough ideas almost never come in a moment of great insight, in a sudden stroke of inspiration. Most important ideas take a long time to evolve, and they spend a long time dormant in the background. It isn't until the idea has had 2 or 3 years, sometimes 10 or 20 years to mature, that it suddenly becomes accessible to you and useful to you in a certain way. And this is partially because good ideas normally come from the collision between smaller hunches, so that they form something bigger than themselves. So you see a lot in the history of innovation, cases of someone who has half of an idea. There's a great story about the invention of the World Wide Web and Tim Berners-Lee. This is a project that Berners-Lee worked on for 10 years. But when he started, he didn't have a full vision for this new medium he was going to invent. He started working on one project as a side project to help him organize his own data. He scrapped that after a couple years, and he started working on another thing. And only after about 10 years did the full vision of the World Wide Web come into being. That is, more often than not, how ideas happen. They need time to incubate, and they spend a lot of time in this partial hunch form. The other thing that's important when you think about ideas this way is that when ideas take form in this hunch state, they need to collide with other hunches. Oftentimes, the thing that turns a hunch into a real breakthrough is another hunch that's lurking in somebody else's mind. And you have to figure out a way to create systems that allow those hunches to come together and turn into something bigger than the sum of their parts. That's why, for instance, the coffee house in the Age of the Enlightenment or the Parisian salons of modernism were such engines of creativity because they created a space where ideas could mingle and swap and create new forms. When you look at the problem of innovation from this perspective, it sheds a lot of important light on the debate we've been having recently about what the internet is doing to our brains. Are we getting overwhelmed with an always connected, multitasking lifestyle? And is that going to lead to less sophisticated thoughts as we move away from the slower, deeper, contemplative state of reading, for instance? Obviously, I'm a big fan of reading, but I think it's important to remember that the great driver of scientific innovation and technological innovation has been the historic increase in connectivity and our ability to reach out and exchange ideas with other people and to borrow other people's hunches and combine them with our hunches and turn them into something new. That really has, I think, been, more than anything else, the primary engine of creativity and innovation over the last 600 or 700 years. And so yes, it's true we're more distracted. But what has happened that is really miraculous and marvelous over the last 15 years is that we have so many new ways to connect and so many new ways to reach out and find other people who have that missing piece that will complete the idea we're working on, or to stumble serendipitously across some amazing new piece of information that we can use to build and improve our own ideas. That's the real lesson of where good ideas come from, that chance favors the connected mind.
And so I go back to what Jane said earlier, that she saw herself as a person who could share some ideas and resources of things that worked. And oftentimes, that's the missing piece that the candidate needed to hear. So you and the candidate working together complete each other and provide those different hunches. And you just never know. From your vast experience, something may be triggered by something they say, and then you bring it up, they talk about it, and then boom, you've got this breakthrough for them in reaching their students. Which is why the emphasis here, I think, is to really help you that we want you guys to work together with the candidates. And there's a couple of things that here that I don't want to belabor, and I want to pause to let you guys ask some questions or even talk about it. I go back to these three key terms that I brought up a few minutes ago. When you are working with your candidate, the key 3 steps is to identify where they want to be, that's the ideal, where they are right now, and then what's the plan to get there. So in just as an example, in planning a lesson, maybe you can call them up or they call you up to talk about planning a lesson. And then the conversation would go something like this, right? Where do you want the students to be? What do you want them to learn? Where are the kids right now? What are their strengths? What are their gaps? And then develop the plan of action. And this is, at its core, the responsive teaching cycle that Susan was talking about, but it's really the same thing as the PTRA cycle: planning, teaching, analyzing, and reflecting, and then applying. So what are your thoughts at this point about your role? Going back to the graphic, your role as a support provider. What are your questions? What are your concerns? Even nuts and bolts.
Well, good that we don't have to draw like the video.
Don't you love that?
That was awesome.
He doesn't draw it that fast, really.
No, I know, but still, I don't even draw like that to begin with.
I have a question.
I have one more handout for you, too.
Oh,
Before form.
okay.
And we pass that along to everyone.
That's okay. All these forms, do they already have the forms?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, and they will fill them out.
Yes.
And when I go observe, I just write down the evidence that
Right.
I observe.
Yes.
The specific things that they want you to help them with.
Oh, okay.
Right?
And-
It's not everything.
Right. And a lot of them, especially if they go into lesson study, this is where these questions and what will the students learn, they're really focused on that. And they're also going to have target students that they've identified, that they're saying, oh, you know,
Right.
these students never seem to get it, they seem to struggle, they get those blank books. I want to structure a lesson so they are in the lesson and they are learning what it is that I'm trying to get across.
So this illustrates the planning process. If you're sitting with your candidate talking about planning the lesson, this might be the structure of that conversation. But if you've already observed them, Jane, then you would come back and you would say to your candidate, what was the goal of the lesson that you taught, so that they can reflect? How did the lesson go? What worked? What didn't work? And what they liked or didn't like? And then how can they make it better? So this would be the conversation you would have after the observation. This is the conversation you would have prior to the lesson.
So there's like a pre-observation
Oh, okay.
conference.
And then after the lesson,
And
it
then
would
a
be this.
post-observation,
Okay.
so like the debriefing. And then it's a focused conversation. It's very specific. It's very detailed in terms of going through the criteria to make sure that they give them the structure and helping them think through how to respond to it.
Okay, so my first visit will probably be that, to do the pre.
Yes.
Talk
Or
about-
even before you
Even
you
before.
schedule, have
Okay.
them send you
You could do it
the
over the
lesson,
phone.
or do have,
Oh,
or
okay.
Skype, or have a conversation, or meet face to face, the pre-observation, and then you go in, and then you know what you're looking for, basically,
You know
when
what
you're
they want.
observing.
You know
What
what
you
they're
want, what they
studying.
want you to focus
Okay.
on, what they,
Yeah, remember that action research question? They're asking you to join them in action research.
Yeah. And then if you were to spend some time analyzing, say, let's say they gave a test, and you want to go over the test and how well the kids did, you would have a very similar conversation with the candidate. What were they assessing? How did the students perform? And then what needs to be done based on what they now identified, right? If students missed certain questions, then what do you need to do as a teacher to make sure the kids get it next time? Because at the end of the day, it's about student success. We want the students to be successful.
Yeah, we want to get them in, Common Core has made this huge shift. And of course, they were only going through teacher, they were only teacher candidates as we were shifting to Common Core. So now out there and they're in this mix of teachers that are embracing it and saying, yay, you know, we have authority and autonomy to make some decisions about student learning versus those that are saying, what, now I don't have curriculum. So they're in this mix and they hopefully will see that it's this circular process of action research and that you don't give a test just to have a summative evaluation. You give a test to give formative feedback to students.
To get information.
So they have information about getting better.
And one of the things that I share with student teachers is that we think, just as Susan was saying, that the test is the end. If you think in terms of really, truly cyclical kinds of instruction in pedagogy, it really is the beginning because it tells you what the students know, what your children in your classroom know, and then how effective you were, and then how do you then go about building the instruction. Did they get it? We move on. They didn't get it, we have to go back. So it really, it's that cyclical, ongoing, rather than end, it's really the beginning to help them focus on what they need to work on, what they need to teach.
And here's some questions that you might, there are question starters that you might use to help your candidate think. And while there's going to be opportunities for you to share your expertise and your experience, oftentimes you'll want to try to elicit that from them so that they become more reflective about their own practice and can develop and expand their own understanding of themselves as instructors. So some suggested questions you can ask your candidates. Thoughts, comments, Don?
Well, I'm sort of wondering if there's some font documentation that you're pulling this from that we will have access to afterward, because I can't take notes fast enough.
Right. So you'll get the PowerPoint and you'll get the article that that quote was drawn from. It's a very short article, powerful to read, and it's more general than just teachers, although it was written for teachers, about how to reach your ideal self. So it's just kind of a good thing, right? Recognizing the ideal, recognizing where you are, and then developing a plan.
You could also go online too. You can also go online and get the fact documents and look at the fact,
Yeah.
because you're getting bits and pieces.
I can send it
So
to
you
you.
need the big
I'm going to
picture.
show my website. Can you just type in
Yeah.
Google Susan Belgrad and you can see where you can access
My students
most all of these.
sent me all of it, and I was like,
Whoa.
whoa.
So if you just type my name into Google, my website will come up for you, Belgrad without the E at the end. And thanks, Ivan. And once you get there, if you click on the 595J course and click on documents, course documents, there you go. And that's, this middle column is the fact user's guide and the support provider description. Oh, if we show that, that's this page here that we can kind of decide.
I can make copies of it.
Okay,
I can run in
well,
Which
with
page
that.
is this description page?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
and you'll see the LA Unified Teacher Guide and the LA Unified Teacher Learning Framework. So, I even have that instructional, so there's another LA Unified document that I could add to that you would see teachers going through that lesson design planning process with a sample teacher manual.
Give me these two pieces, and I can make copies of those.
But I would go ahead and click on that.
Which one?
The support provider description, because that is the document that sort of makes visible what our expectations are for us. And actually, we distributed this to all of the students in the program at the very get-go, and they were to take it back and give it to their support providers, and we emailed it to the school-based ones. But this is available for you. And essentially, the part of this that we just went through is the support providers, in the next paragraph down, right there. Does the support provider regularly visit? Support provider at observations or meetings when the adoption candidate needs assistance? Address the CSTP. So this really covers what we began the meeting talking about. What
So,
kind of roles
yeah.
the support provider.
At the end of the courses, the students will fill out a form that asks them these questions. So the answer to these questions will depend on what you do with them, right? And by regularly visit, we don't mean that you actually physically go there. It could be phone calls, it could be emails, it could be FaceTime, Skype, Google Hangouts, or you can collaborate on a Google Doc.
And the student understands the vision, the definition of visit?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just spending time. This was written in, sort of official language, but we at Csun understand that visit doesn't mean physically go there. But 2 observations is
Yeah,
required.
we do want you to observe the pre-observation post and the lesson study,
Yeah.
invitation or lesson study design. We want you to hopefully be present for that. Because as I've introduced that to our courses, both here and in Dominguez Hills, again, is that actual research question, that inquiry question of how are the students acquiring knowledge or developing their own feelings of success with relation to my teaching. And so when the support provider is in the room with this lesson study, you're really helping them. You're being the eyes of the small table work. You're being the eyes of the whole classroom. That perhaps if they're securing materials and getting ready for the next section of their lesson, they don't see that what's going on. So that is how you are supporting them during your lesson study.
So I want to add a couple of key points here. One is the onus is on the candidate to contact you, right? Because it's all driven by these assignments, these forms that they have to fill out. So it's their responsibility to contact you and say, hey, I'm working on this, I need your feedback, or I need some help on this. That's what they're supposed to do. But number 2 says, if you are sensing something's wrong, 1, you're not hearing from them, or 2, that whatever they're giving you seems to be kind of off the mark, then that's when you kick in your professionalism and say, hey, I think we need to talk. I think we need to meet. But really, they're professionals, they're teachers, they already have their preliminary credential. They understand from Susan that all of this, all of the meetings you have with them, all of the work you do with them is driven by these assignments. So it's very concrete and tangible. You don't have to come up with your own agenda. And it's driven by a finite set of forms that they have to fill out, and that's what drives those conversations. So it should make your life less stressful, I think.
Yeah, here's where I would like to engage in a little gracious professionalism, and thank you. Thank you for being the professionals that you are. Thank you for being willing to, you're never paid enough to do this kind of work. What the payoff is, and what I think we all enjoy as professionals, is seeing one another grow professionally, develop more artistry and skill as teachers, but even more than that, to make a difference in the lives of our students and make a difference in the outcomes that these students can achieve. So few of us go into education because we believe we're going to be done well. We go into education because we love the processes. And so for each of you to spend time as a support provider, taking phone calls or checking in or responding to the concerns that they might have is really quite a gracious aspect of being a professional educator. This is a completion of that form that we gave you at the outset, that we engaged in the very same thing. We did some brainstorming ourselves and came up with some description. and to go back to the video that Ivan just showed, you see how one of us can come up with a few of these things, but together we filled up each one of these bubbles essentially, and definitely reflected the ideas and the points that each of you brought up about being a collaborator, a mentor, a practitioner, and a professional, and candidates that are in the program.
And then as Pam gets ready to pass out these papers, just some more tips for you as a coach, mentor, that these are some things that you can just keep in mind as you work with them. You're helping the teachers clarify their goals and remind them of those roles and the principals, asking them questions that focus on students. Always keep the focus on the kids. What are kids getting? What are they not getting? How can we make it better? And then invite them to share their ideas. Share your ideas, of course, and make them accessible. And I go back to Jane, talking about sharing her expertise. That's exactly what we want. Be responsive to their concerns. It's their agenda. Again, it's driven by their assignments and their work. So just be sensitive to that. And then refocus the conversation if the discussion gets off track. If they start, for example, complaining about their administrators, that's off track. You know, that may be they could be frustrated about something, but your job is not to be their shoulder to cry on. It's really to help them be more successful as a teacher. So if they start getting off track and they start talking about something that's really not relevant, you know, listen for a few seconds and then redirect it. And that's it. These are our tips for you as a support provider.
So what I handed out was that preliminary form that they completed online, so that table that you see, they expanded that as they needed to draft out their IIP, and there's the continuum of practice below that, and then we have a copy of this document that we just decided. I asked the teacher candidates, to keep their own paper folder of all of this because they are filling out a number of forms and they're engaged in a number of reflective practices. They don't have to keep a paper binder, but I just learned as their instructor that I was learning. You know, and whenever I'm an instructor, I think of myself as the head learner, and I don't know if you think that yourself too. But you know, I believe that I learn 95% of that which I teach, and for sure I've done that with reintroducing myself to Csun, because in fact we were doing this several years ago. So I've asked them to put some of this together in a paper binder for themselves, because it does help them to feel a little bit more concrete. And when you come to visit, you might be able, you know, it's like asking them to keep a journal. I always had my student teachers keep double entry journals because I can trace back their history in the classroom. I'm just trying. Yes.
Double entry?
Yeah. Are you familiar with it?
No.
It's very simple. I would have them write on one side of their, you know, take a
Fold piece of paper in half.
fold a piece of paper in half. On this side, write exactly what happened, exactly what their interaction was. And here, take out those judgments, you know, like they're talking about the administrator. Here they can sort of gripe about the administrative interference and whatever. But here they can write, well, you know, blah, blah, blah. So I'd like them to separate their observation and the factual information from their reactions to it. Especially important, I used to work with teachers with severely emotionally disturbed kids. Double entry journal really helped them to become reflective about their craft at the same time that they separated a lot of the emotion and the human judgment out of their behavior. But at any rate, I have found that many of the teachers that are in the program are interested in keeping a paper binder just so that they have a real easy way of saying, oh, the C3 form, you know, and they go to it. And by the way, that's what they're working on, is they're moving into the C forms. So
Good that you got it straight.
by the way, and I'm happy to be a resource to you. My email is on the PowerPoint presentation, and again, you see that you can reach me by going to Susan Belgrave, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Any questions that come up in between the discussions that you have or the lessons that you have.
One of the other activities that I would like to just kind of piggyback on, I didn't know whether this got passed out or not when I.
Yeah.
So then that would be a piece that we talked about. We did a think, and we did a pair, and we did a share, and then you take this document, which is a little bit more delineated as far as roles and responsibilities under each one of those categories, and kind of see where you, as we finish in this process, where you are, and then as you then also evolve as a support provider in terms of letting us know, in terms of covering some of these other bulleted points as it related to what the initial piece is, to where you are now, to where you will be in your own practice working as a support provider as well. So it's that whole reflective cycle again of making application and talking about that we would then do the same thing with ourselves as we're asking our students to do.
Are there questions? No?
I'm smiling, that's great.
I feel like because I
It's a lot
had
of
jumped
stuff.
into it, this is really solidifying things for me.
We will have it after this.
Yes.
And then, yeah, you have our contact information, so
Yes,
for
we're-
sure.
We're here for you. I have to tell you, I'm very excited to be back doing this again. Because it's wonderful work, helping to create teachers and to bring up your teacher candidacy. But it's so important, it's so gratifying to see teachers feeling supported, new teachers feeling supported. It's excellent work that we do very well in being engaged in this. And I certainly enjoy working with my colleagues across the college, from the dean's office to the secondary education, and we're working with special education too, who have been doing an induction program here at Cal State Northridge for 3 years now, I think.
Yeah.
So they've been our mentors, and so, you know, anything you do, it's like that Robert Fulghum, Mr. Richard Fulghum, everything I ever needed to learn, I learned in kindergarten. And that idea that I hold hands with everyone, and I probably get through the world a lot easier when I'm doing that. And we feel that way about each of your joining with us to explore the world of teacher induction in post-Common Core or in the midst of Common Core and anticipating next generation science standards. I think it's a really important and exciting time to be an educator in this again. And I appreciate you putting this here.
We thank you for coming and spending time
Thank
with
you
us
so
this
much.
afternoon.
Thank you.
All right.
There are still refreshments to be
Yes,
had.
I ate more than my fair share.
And let's thank Tony for.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
Tony.
You're great.
So funny, I never knew that about you, Ivan. You're always one-liners.
Oh, you don't know.
Another
All right, way to
slide.
be taking care of that.